Are you a venture capitalist, family office, or about to launch your own angel syndicate? Then this week's sponsor could be your next trusted partner. This episode was produced in cooperation with Leva, the leading platform in Switzerland to set up and manage your SPVs and syndicate your deal flow. Leva allows you to set up SPVs from your computer in just 5 minutes, starting from as little as 1,000 Swiss francs. As you know, Swisspreneur runs its own syndicate, and we've been using Leva since our first deal. We couldn't be happier with them. If you're currently setting up your syndicate or structuring your club deal, we recommend you to check out their website, www.leva.pe. That's LEVA.pe. And contact the team for a quick demo.
We're not at all saying that it should be all about, social aspects and environmental aspects, because let's face it, the financial aspects, all these other variables that you just mentioned, they are just critical, because otherwise the startup doesn't work. It can't scale, it can't grow, and so on. And it won't be able to raise funds.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Ansuya.
Welcome, Christina. Thank you so much for joining us today here at the Swisspreneur studio.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So Christina is a project manager at Levo, developed at EPFL and currently hosted by E4S. Levo is a methodology and an online platform that helps entrepreneurs and investors assess the sustainability and impact of startups. Exactly. So this is a really cool platform. I checked it out when Sylvain sent it across to me. And we're super excited to dive into it and what you do and what are the goals and plans with your startup. So let's get into it. Christina, you got your master's in sustainable resource management. And this is a little bit of an unusual study to do back in 2013. So how did you get into this topic back then?
Well, I think it started a bit earlier already. So I've always been interested in sustainability, even though I think back then it wasn't really called sustainability. I was interested in nature and I got really concerned about environmental degradation. But I didn't really know what to do about it. So it was more like a broader concern and interest. But as an individual, I had no clue what to do about it. And then I met one night in a beer garden randomly. I'm not sure, like in Bavaria, there's this rule that you squeeze with as many people as possible on a table and you start talking to random people. And those turned out to be entrepreneurs who had just founded a company, a sustainable energy startup. And this was the first time I also got in touch with entrepreneurship and, sustainable entrepreneurship and this connection. So I wrote them an email at night at home. Next week, I started there as an intern. And this is really how I learned about the potential of entrepreneurship for really tackling sustainability. And basically, from then on, it was all kind of, afloat. It was just, it came all together naturally. And I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So I worked at this company and they were reached out by the university who wanted to conduct interviews with them. And basically what they did, they said, okay, you can conduct an interview with us, but you give Christina a place in your study program. And that's how I ended up there. It was really random, but it was the perfect combination for me to figure out how to link this all together. My work in a startup that was really working towards sustainability, my studies, really then focusing, learning more about sustainability, and then also doing some research on that this intersection it came all together. All the pieces kind of fell together.
That's a great start, right? Usually these kinds of stories always start with something just falling into place and not necessarily you chasing after it, exactly. just being in the right places at the right time with the right attitude.
Exactly.
So already then, you mentioned you were interested in sustainability, you were very connected with nature. Where did the entrepreneurial drive come from?
Well, as I said, it was really learning about these entrepreneurs. I had never thought about that. So in my bachelor's, yes, I had a course on entrepreneurship. Actually, it was super abstract for me back then. Like even the word, I was making fun of it. I was really like, what is this? What is this supposed to mean? But then when I got like the chance to experience it hands-on, I realized for me, really, entrepreneurship is one of the most powerful tools that we have to tackle societal problems. Maybe the most powerful tool that we have. So this is really when I started to get interested. But then I also saw there are many like barriers for them still. It's really difficult. Like they really face challenges in leveraging their potential. So that's how I got interested in also doing more research on it to understand how I could help them.
Okay, wonderful. And then basically you went on to do your PhD and you continued as a research associate at EPFL for 4 years before you started Levo. Were you that time aiming for an academic career?
Well, it's tough. That changed like a couple of times every day still. So now I did my PhD on sustainable entrepreneurship because it really, back then in Munich still, because for me it was really a good combination of, working with entrepreneurs, but then also, like really using these insights to produce knowledge that can be used again. I was always unsure. I mean, I have this nerdy side, really deep diving into topics, thinking for hours and hours, staring at a page, like building models and so on. But then on the other hand, for me, this all doesn't make sense if you don't get it out and people don't use it to actually do something with it and generate something good with it.
And then basically you started Levo, right, in 2019. After your work as a research associate. So how did this idea come about?
Well, it was still, I did the first 3 years of Levo as a researcher still. Okay. So it was really in 2019, I was working as a postdoc at EPFL and still focusing on these questions. So basically what I was asking myself was, on the one hand, how can entrepreneurship be used to tackle societal problems? But then also kind of the other way around, how can startups integrate sustainability from early stages on? So not later on when they run into problems, but really starting as a sustainable, or now we call it responsible business, from the beginning on. And then in 2019, we were approached by a group of venture capitalists who had done a workshop, a session together. And those were not impact investors. They were like normal investors. And they were really thinking, okay, about what role do we actually play in society? And they came up with the answer that they have a role in society to contribute to something good, not just to, generating revenues and exactly. But then also they realized they had no idea how to really go about it. I mean, everyone talks about it, and there seem to be so many frameworks out there, so many approaches and so on. But it's really difficult to figure out what to use, where to start, how to go about it. And they were kind of lost, and they approached us. And we said, okay, we give it a try. I mean, we see what is out there, what we can do for you. So for a year, that was back then also together with the organization Start Global in St. Gallen, we set out to do a big market analysis. We spoke to all different kinds of actors, figuring out, like what impact and sustainability measurement frameworks are there already? Why are they not used? Why are they maybe not useful for entrepreneurs or for investors, like maybe more for other types of ventures like NGOs, social businesses, and so on. And we really try to understand everything, also understand what is actually measured, because people measure many different things.
Right.
So that is super confusing. It took us over a year to get an overview, to really understand it. And then from there, really building a methodology on like, how could we now use all these puzzle pieces that we have connected to build something that is useful for entrepreneurs and for investors. And that's how it all started.
Excellent. And this methodology now, it's so highly researched. You did it part of your research associate work, your PhD work. Does it apply to all kinds of startups at this point, or do you have to tweak it still?
No. I mean, we had to find a balance, right? I mean, if you build something that is really useful, supposed to be useful for everyone, then it also means it's not perfect for anyone.
Right.
You know, like this is the balance.
Yeah.
Like either you say like it's for a really specific type of entrepreneurs, let's say, you know, those with already an impact focus versus those who don't have the impact focus at all. Or you say it's for super early stage versus later stages. It's for med tech versus education. I don't know, like the industry. So of course you could design something that is perfect for each of these specific types. But our goal was really to develop something that works for every entrepreneur. And at Levo, we're not saying we are the best framework for everyone out there. It's just that it functions. It's really useful for any kind of startup. And it's easy to use. So it's kind of the low-level entry that every startup can take. And then later on, the startups can figure out, do we want to use additional tools with it? Do we want to, I don't know, get B Corp certified? Is that maybe a next step that we can take? But Levo is really the basis that works for every kind of startup.
All right. And this year you also got undertook by E4S, which is the Enterprise for Society Center. So how did this collaboration come about?
Yes. So as I said, I mean, it started as a research project. It was always like really hands-on and practice-oriented. But at one point, the methodology was developed. And then we were extremely lucky that EPFL, the chair of entrepreneurship, and the former vice president of EPFL, Mark Gruber, he believed in the idea and he gave us money to implement it into, like, to really turn this into a platform. And this was another year we spent on the development of the platform, really working with professionals, because also for us it was important that it's, you know, it's sexy, it's nice to use, it's fun to use for the startups and not really complex. And then after another year in 2020, we had developed the platform and it started to work and startups were using it. And we realized, okay, now we need to take this to the market. You know, we need a business. We need to build the business case around that. And I mean, yes, I'm an entrepreneurship researcher and so on, but also we can't do it all ourselves. I mean, also just because, it's too much to do. And luckily then we got in touch with E4S, and especially with Tech for Impact, which is one kind of unit of E4S. And their big value or their vision is really to activate change. So that means they want to take really practice-oriented research projects from the university and provide them with the knowledge and the network they need in order to really go to the market and bring it out. And that's where we thought, okay, this is a really cool opportunity. So we were lucky and we were taken over by them. And for now, the idea is really at the moment, Levo is incubated there, but really then also, of course, with the goal, to spin it out as soon as possible next year.
So that's actually a very critical part, you know, of like having the right support in the beginning. And it's really great that institutions support this, having the same values, which obviously E4S and Tech Impact also have. For our listeners out there, as you said, that a lot of the startups and investors don't exactly know what it means to be a sustainable business. So what is it that Levo, like how do you define a sustainable business?
So that's a really good question and a really tricky question, obviously. So I guess my answer has like two parts. So first of all, we don't really speak of a sustainable business anymore. I mean, I use now the term sustainable entrepreneurship just because it's a common term. But when we speak also, when at Levo, we prefer the term responsible business, because responsible for us is kind of an umbrella term. Because at Levo, we look at two different things. So first of all, it's the external impact that a company has. So this is really the question, how does your product, your service, everything you produce, all your outputs, affect, first of all, your customers and your users, and then on a higher level, like society and the planet. So this is often linked to the SDGs, and this is really this impact that everyone talks about. And that's one important element. And of course, the goal is to produce as much positive impact as possible and reduce the negative impact. So it's really about this net impact that you created. But then on the other hand, that's not enough. And also that's also why I don't like much these labels, social entrepreneur versus like non-social entrepreneur, or impact entrepreneur versus, I don't know, finance-driven egoistic entrepreneur. I don't know. Because also not every business model is made to generate giant impact and, contribute to the SDGs. And that's also okay. So there's a really important second element besides the external impact, which is the internal operational sustainability. So this is the how, like how the business is run, like all your operations. And this is often like linked to ESG criteria, so environment, society, and governance criteria. And it's really behind the scenes, like what do you do? What kind of resources do you use? How do you treat your employees, and so on? And they are really, they are different things, external impact and operational sustainability, but they are, for us, two sides of the same coin. And then together, that's what we call responsible entrepreneurship. And the goal for us is not to become a responsible business or a sustainable business, because that doesn't exist. Realistically, same as, the perfect sustainable human doesn't exist. Because by getting up in the morning and making yourself a cup of coffee, you're not sustainable. So it's not about, this dream of becoming this green unicorn company, because it's just unrealistic. And then we often see that entrepreneurs, they don't do anything because, it just seems so impossible to become perfect. That's why they just lean back and say, well, we can't become perfect anyway, so we don't do anything. We don't even try. So for us, it's really responsible means looking, like really, taking a look, where are we standing, doing the assessments, and then thinking about what can we actually improve, what is realistic for us also to improve within the next year, and then we do it again, and so on. So it's this continuous improvement, both regarding like operational sustainability and external impact, that we consider as like responsible entrepreneurship. So
I have a lot of questions now coming up from this. So the first one I want to know is, you mentioned that a lot of the companies, they can't also look at the external part of it. Do these companies approach you, or how do you kind of close this gap? Because there could be startup founders, investors who don't exactly know, as you mentioned, what they need to be doing.
Yeah.
And would they be the ones who would then come to you, or would you go to them?
Well, for now, we are in a really lucky position that they come to us. I hope this stays in the future. No, we are lucky because, there's a really, really big demand. Because it's not only for, some entrepreneurs approach us for intrinsic motivational reasons. They just want to, improve their companies, understand how they can get better. But then let's face it, more and more investors are inquiring about it. More and more customers are interested in it. It's super important for talent attraction and retention. So like understanding how sustainable you are and how much impact you generate has become really inevitable for all kinds of startups. You can't avoid it anymore.
So you don't see like only a particular set of startups coming to you. It's basically the whole range.
Not at all. Okay. And it's super interesting because, we work with a lot of startups that are, or consider themselves as like being rather far. And interestingly, there often in our assessment, we find some, like weak spots, like really black holes where we're like, okay, and maybe you should take a look at this. And then we have other companies that are totally like far away from sustainability or impact and have never really thought about this. But then they take the assessment and we see like, wow, they, the way the venture is built, it's actually already quite sustainable. And also with their product, they are having an impact that might not be intended, but actually, it's an unintended impact, but it's still an impact. And it really helps them to identify these and then also use them in their communication and in their fundraising, for example.
Okay, wow. So my second question is regarding, the operational part of assessment. There you mentioned that you look at different aspects like the well-being as well of the employees, how they're managing the company internally. Do you also look at it from the tech point of view? Like what kind of tech stack they have, they're deployed on the cloud, where is that? What is the consumption?
Yes. So that's all considered. That's really all. This is part of the environmental part of the assessment. Exactly. It's like how much cloud do they need? Where are they located? The energy consumption. This is all parts of it in the environmental assessment, because this is also something that is actually quite easy for entrepreneurs to change if you are aware of it.
Exactly. And because also now there's a lot of talk, about ethical technology, ethical design, as well as laws that are coming up because of tech makers, lawmakers, on privacy issues. Yes. So these are all very relevant, hot topics, and I'm assuming that you also try to cover these.
So all the data safety, like GDPR compliance and so on, it's all covered in the assessment, because this is really what I said, it's not only about the type of product that it has, that you have, and the effects it then has on users and so on. It's really about the how, like how did you produce this product? How is it, the materials you use, and for tech, like the energy you use and so on, like all these different kinds of things.
And do you measure, because a lot of the companies, they also want to, see how that impacts other areas of their business. For example, productivity of the employees, or how much they feel like they're contributing to a company that has certain kinds of values. Is there a way to, after setting some of these frameworks in place, measure different outcomes?
Well, it's something we encourage the startups to do themselves, like really also involving their employees in Levo, in the process of Levo, like showing them the results and saying, okay, we have to set goals now, because Levo is really about you take the assessment and then you set your goals. And it makes a lot of sense to involve your employees. And of course, we encourage startups to, measure it in a way or another, like really hard measuring, or more like, by speaking to their employees about it. But also then within Levo, we're not selling any of the data. The data is like fully, we're not giving it out to anyone. Right. But of course, it's still, so Levo comes out of research. And again, we use the data to do our research. So ideally, a company goes through Levo every single year. So you set your goals. After 1 year, there's a monitoring. And then you re-enter the process. You take your assessment again, you set new goals and so on. And that's data that we analyze. So we can see, for example, okay, the company has improved, on these dimensions. And they have actually, reduced also, or not so many people quit. Or, they were able to increase the diversity rate, like these things. And since, we have quite some companies running through Levo, we hopefully in a couple of years can make really like solid claims about really how setting certain types of goals then also affects the performance of the venture.
So does this mean that now, companies can basically look and measure success differently? Because up until now, mostly companies just focus on traction, user engagement, how much revenue they're making. And that has been the driving force also for the economy as well. Do you think that this is going to change?
Well, it's at least our big hope. It's really funny that you asked the question this way, because this is really one of our main goals, or this is really our vision when someone asks me. It's really challenging the notion of success, challenging how success is defined for startups. And we're not at all saying that it should be all about, social aspects and environmental aspects, because let's face it, the financial aspects, all these other variables that you just mentioned, they are just critical, because otherwise the startup doesn't work. It can't scale, it can't grow, and so on. And it won't be able to raise funds. So we're not saying kick them out and focus on something else now. But for us, it's really success should be defined as an entrepreneur's ability to combine financial aspects with social and environmental aspects, to balance them, but ideally also to use sustainability, to use social and environmental aspects in a way that they contribute to the financial success. And this is really something you need to be really smart, to how to go about that. And this is a skill that should define entrepreneurial success for me.
Definitely. I feel like, as a humanity, we've spent so much of our time and effort just focusing on certain aspects of what we think it means to be successful, which has now led us to this situation we're in with all of these problems we have with climate, with mental health, and so on. So I definitely feel like what we're doing here is so important. And I hope that Levo is really the driving force for this.
Yes, we hope so too.
All right. So one question I want to ask is, you mentioned that there are companies that come in that have no, idea about sustainability, and they're also in probably a place where they're not doing many things correctly. So depending on this stage that they're in, where do you start with assisting them? So what is sort of the first kind of key topics that you choose for such companies?
Well, kind of the process is always the same for any type of company. They run through the 2 assessments and they get some recommendations, and they get even a more specific list of recommendations based on their strategic goals, and then they set goals for themselves. So this is the same process for any kind of startup. But what is important in Levo is that we decided not to give any score, because first of all, giving scores leads to comparisons that are often not meaningful. And second of all, scores are super discouraging. So if you score, 9 out of 100 in the beginning as an entrepreneur, you might feel like, I don't know, I put this away. Like, I don't want to communicate this, and I don't,
I'm too far behind.
Exactly.
Probably,
I can't do it anyways. And, why would you tell anyone, hey, I did an assessment and I scored 9 out of 100? I mean, it's not really the best advertisement.
Right.
So that's really not what we want to do. Because the thing is, the fact that they score 9 out of 100 is not because they're bad people. I mean, not necessarily. Could be, but but not necessarily. In most cases that I've seen, this is not the reason. It's just because they just started and they are concerned. I mean, setting up a company, you have to think about so many different things at the same time. You're facing crazy resource constraints. You're super worried about, how to pay your bills at the end of the month. I mean, come on, you can't be perfect. It's not your first priority, and this is totally clear. So that's why at Levo, we really give them an understanding of those are all the topics that are eventually important. We try to teach them that it's important to think about some of them early on, but it's also then important for the entrepreneurs to understand which are the ones that matter for us now. And it can be, out of the 50 topics that we give you, it's okay that you focus on only 2 of them at the beginning. But you should think about, which 2 of them are important for us and which can we really do giving our resource constraints. And we're really, so I said, we're not giving them any score. So what we do is on all the dimensions, you get kind of an evaluation just telling you if you are basic, intermediate, or advanced. But when you're basic, that doesn't mean that you suck. It just means that you just started.
Yeah.
So then the idea of Levo is to say, okay, now you know you're basic. So now let's take a look on how you can move to intermediate.
And for companies that are, let's say, a part of a bigger corporation, so there are like sort of these child companies under a bigger umbrella, do you evaluate the bigger corporations as well in this process, or you're focusing primarily on the company itself?
For now, we're focusing primarily on the company itself. I mean, we've been reached out by also some larger corporates who wanted us to, work with their companies. It is something that is super interesting that we definitely want to do in the future. But for now, also, given our resource constraints, we need to focus on something. We have to try to be good in something. And that's really the small units and the small startups at the moment.
And do you think that this can also help in changing certain policies that are in place and governance that is around these topics?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there are many questions and answer options related to policies. We're also now more and more trying to not only tell them that, it could be a great idea to establish a policy, but also, give them an idea of how such policies could look like.
Right.
And I really think that Levo helps like changing policies, putting in place policies, because you have this narrative, you have these, like, you can explain people why you do it. We're not doing it to harass you and to, like make your life more difficult. But, it's much easier when you can tell your employees, I mean, this is our big strategic goal. This is how sustainability, how becoming more responsible will help us reach these goals. And a policy is one element that we need to put in place in order to reach these goals. And I mean, that makes it much more comprehensible for the employees.
Because law in itself, right, is so slow in building, the right kind of rules and regulations to set in place for a lot of topics that concern technology or environment. Do a lot of these startup founders come to you and say, oh, this is not actually a legal requirement, so why should we set this in as a policy for our company?
Surprisingly, not so much, because we see a lot of pressure from employees. And I mean, they need their employees. That's their most valuable resource. And so most of the time, it's really not about legal requirements. It's much more about pressure from the employees, or that they ran into a problem and they now want us to, help them figure out how to solve this problem. For example, when it comes to diversity, I mean, you hired 30 men and now you have difficulties hiring a woman. Well, right. Not so surprising. But legally, it happens sometimes that we have companies telling us, well, but we don't have these X amount of employees yet, so legally we're not required to do that. And I'm always saying, yeah, but I mean, are you like aspiring to grow, or are you like, is your goal to stay small? I mean, and if you're aspiring to grow, then it's much smarter actually to put these things in place now, instead of, having a completely different structure and then having to go through a really, like challenging change process afterwards. So you already bring your employees on board now, you make it part of your DNA, you hire people accordingly in line with all these policies that you put in place, and you will actually avoid a lot of, worrying and so on later on when it's legally required.
Okay. And what is the investors' take on this topic, like with Levo's framework?
It's funny. I think we're going through a big change in mindset when it comes to investors. And for us, it's really interesting, but also challenging, because I think at an awareness level, most of the investors, they're fully on board. They understand it matters. Same as the entrepreneurs, some of them for intrinsic motivational reasons, others for, because also they have to justify, like, how sustainable their portfolio is and so on.
Right.
But then, of course, also then they lack the knowledge about it. I mean, this is not their core knowledge. So they really need to rely also on someone telling them, okay, this is what you need to focus on. And I think we're also doing a lot of educational work there, because, I mean, also investors are super busy people, and they really, most of the time, I really believe them that they want to take care of it. They want to take it into consideration. But please, it shouldn't take more than 15 minutes,
Yeah.
And it's always like, yeah, well, this doesn't, it will not work like this.
So that's the sort of investor personality, right? They're used to these quick pitches. They don't want anything to take more than a few minutes of their time.
Exactly. And that's a bit the problem with sustainability, because financial performance, you can nicely break it down into, like 5, 6, 7, I don't know, you choose your key variables, your KPIs that you want to look at. You measure them, they are hard measures. And sustainability is A, much more complex, and B, very often much softer and more qualitative, so more difficult to assess. So we have these discussions with investors about really telling them, if you want to do it right, you will need to invest a bit more time than these 15 minutes that you were willing to give us into it, because otherwise it's just like greenwashing, it's just you do something, it's super superficial, and, you do it just to check a box, but it's meaningless. And then it's really, this is like maybe our nature as researchers, we really say, okay, but then we don't want to be connected to that.
It's the integrity of things as well.
Exactly.
Are we at a point now where, founders, entrepreneurs can go into a pitch meeting to investors and put these aspects also into their pitch deck?
Yes, we are. And I mean, we have now gotten feedback from some entrepreneurs who have done it, who have really, copied the results of Levo into their pitch deck. And it's really, I mean, we are at this moment where it's still easy to overperform, because also the investors, they might expect something, but, doing Levo and already putting it there and saying, hey, we've done our homework is something that can be quite impressive also and leave a good impression.
Great. So this is a good point for our listeners to keep in mind, to also start incorporating this if they haven't already into their pitches. Yeah. What about the climate change deniers out there? How would you go about educating or making this information more understandable to people who are outrightly denying things that are, happening in the world?
Well, I think the real deniers of like big dynamics as climate change, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to, convince them. And I'm also not sure if Levo has a chance to do that. I think that's tough. For these people, I would really just say, read the research. I mean, 99% of all studies agree that it's human-made and so on. So for the real climate change deniers, I think we can't do much. At least that's not our main goal. But then for the people who believe that sustainability is expensive and annoying and additional burden and so on, that's more, I think, the type of audience that we can, convince to change their minds. Because it's really not that we're saying, it should be social against financial, as I said. So it's totally fine that you still believe in finance and your hard numbers, and that's your main focus. So it doesn't matter. It's just about, integrating the two and really understanding how much, and it's really crazy to what extent being sustainable nowadays can really contribute to the financial side of your venture. I mean, I said it now already, with the customers, with the employees, with so many different things. You can't neglect it anymore. So I think it's more there where Levo comes in and tries to show them that it pays off. And in the end, honestly, I don't care why you do it, but it will pay off for you. And it will also then pay off for the planet. So it's a win-win.
Let's also talk about, another term that is quite widely used these days, which is the circular economy. What does that mean? And how does that tie in with responsible/sustainable business?
Yeah, I mean, circular economy is a super important concept in sustainability. I mean, closing the loops and so on. This is a really important, approach to sustainability, creating a more sustainable production and consumption systems. But it's only one way of doing it. I mean, there are many different other aspects to sustainability, like all this social perspective and so on, that is not covered in this idea of a circular economy. So I would say the circular economy is one really interesting pathway. And if the startups choose to that this is the one they want to focus on, then Levo can help them also to identify how to take the first steps. So we do ask questions like, do you have set goals towards circularity, to closing the loops and so on. So it's one option that we give them, but it's one out of many.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And how has the performance of Levo been so far?
So it has been developed with really many, many, many startups and investors now who have gone through it, who have tested it. I mean, over 4 years now. At the moment, we are really at a stage where, many people reach out to us. We're still at the stage where we have to finalize the product development because we've done the latest rounds of user testing, especially with investors who told us, if you're supposed to use this is what we want and this is what we need to see. So we are in the process of finalizing this, and then it's really about rolling it out to the market and scaling it, because it's a bit also what we hear from our own supporters and investors. It's a bit like the winner takes it all market. So either you are the framework. I mean, we see it with B Corp. It's the framework all around the world, and our goal is really in the next year to really scale it on a Swiss, German, French market, and then really establish it as a standard, like worldwide, hopefully.
And for scaling it to other markets, is there a lot of tweaks that need to be made, or is it something that can be applied all over?
Well, luckily, the external impact assessment can be applied really independent of the context, and also the goal setting. The operational sustainability assessment, in most parts, we can keep it. But then, of course, there are some things, like the legal things like maternity leave or like these questions that we ask. Because, of course, we have a box where they can say we follow legal requirements. But, of course, that means something completely different in Germany versus in the US or in Switzerland. So there are some small tweaks that we will need to make. But, in general, it's not so complex.
Okay. And what are individually like your plans for next year and going forward?
So, of course, I mean, Livo is my startup baby, and I really want to stay as closely involved as possible. But I'm also taking a professorship in entrepreneurship at the University of Geneva by the end of this year. So I have a bit like a dual role then. And it's also, it will be a balance. It will be a tricky balance. I'm sure about that. So we're currently expanding the team, onboarding new people who will then also take over the lead and really, develop Livo further. And, let's see.
And so right now, primarily Livo is funded with E4S and EPFL as well.
Yes, so it was E4S who made it was EPFL who made the first investments. Now it's E4S. We got some really generous support by La Vaudoise, the insurance company, who believed in the project and are really funding quite a significant part at the moment. But then next year, we really need to think about a different investment strategy. This is like ongoing at the moment.
Okay, great. And for our listeners, is there any resources, books, podcasts, anything like that you would like to recommend, or gadgets that you use?
Yeah, well, of course, I recommend logging into Livo. No, the thing about Livo is it's for free. Like really, the use of Livo is for free. And as I said, it's designed to be educational. So even if you don't want to go through the entire process with your startup, or if you don't even have a startup, you can just, log in, you create an account. And at least the operational sustainability assessment, I think, is just something that can be interesting to just click through, to learn about the different aspects that matter when it comes to sustainability. And also the answer, see the answer options. And because often entrepreneurs tell us, can we get a copy of the answer options? Just because, this is like food for thought on what they could do next. So
that's an excellent resource to know that we can just go in and read about it.
Exactly. So some advertisement for ourselves, but I think it really makes sense. Besides that, it's a bit a classic example, but I always encourage people to go to the website also of Fairphone. I mean, they have not used Livo, but there you can really see how you can use this in your communication, because Fairphone really has this idea we don't have to be perfect from the beginning on, but we are super transparent with our customers, saying like we took a careful look, we know where we're standing, and this is how we're going to improve. And you can really see for them how it's paying off and how they use it. So it's always, for me, inspiring to see how they report also. I think many startups can learn a lot there. And then maybe one last thing I want to recommend, just because I think it could also show the entrepreneurs out there why they should care about it. It's a new magazine from Germany, I think. It's called Flip. And they do some research really investigating the sustainability claims of startups. So they are uncovering the greenwashing. And they have had some really big, stories where it really backfired for some startups. They made these sustainability claims. They were not sound. They were not based on real data.
Wow.
And it can really backfire. And I think there are more and more of these magazines and these efforts from journalists, but also, all different kinds of actors coming. And customers, employees, and so on, they start to be smarter and smarter. And they start to see the wrong, false claims that you make as a startup. So I really would recommend this as a resource just to, see what could happen if you don't do it soundly.
Thank you for these recommendations. I'm personally definitely going to check these out. So thanks a lot. So this brings us to our last segment of the episode, which is the rapid fire round. So are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. What's your biggest ecological sin?
Oh, my biggest ecological sin. Chocolate. A lot.
But do you really focus on buying now fair trade chocolates from farmer cooperatives? No.
That's the thing. For other kind of food, yes, I do. For chocolate, no. I have my favorites and they're not sustainable.
Okay. Academia or entrepreneurship?
Never only one of them. I'm too nerdy for entrepreneurship and too practice-oriented for... Well, I chose academia now.
Yeah. And going forward, would you be more taking in the role as an advisory probably, or do you still want to be hands-on operational with Levo?
I still want to be a bit hands-on operational, yes.
Okay. What do you wish you did more often?
Be in nature, not doing anything, not looking at my phone, and really not disconnecting from things. And I'm really bad in that.
What do you wish startups, companies did more of?
Assessing their sustainability. No, but honestly, taking the time to take a look at this, and it takes half a day, and it's really paying off.
Where do you go to recharge?
On my sofa, being at home. I'm really for this, being alone at home on my sofa, actually.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Christina, for this very insightful interview. And we're very happy to have you here and hope to see more of Levo doing wonderful things in the startup community.
Yes, we will work hard to do that. Thanks for the invitation again.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.